Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. Each week on this show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. This week, I am delighted that Rob Andrews has joined me in the studio. Rob is the founder and chief executive officer of Allen Austin, one of the world's most trusted executive search, interim executive coaching, and culture shaping practices. Building on his early experience as an operating president with major retailers, Rob has spent the last 30 years researching the highest performing organizations in the world. He and his team have designed powerful diagnostics to assess organizational health and help senior leaders build peak performing companies. Rob is a strategist, a visionary, and human capital leadership aficionado, and he lends his passion for facilitating and building high performance teams to boards and CEOs around the world. Rob is well read. He completed an undergraduate degree in marketing economics at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, Texas. And he studied business at the University of Texas at Austin in 1996. Rob completed his leading professional service firms program at the Harvard Business School in 2007. I'm pleased to say he's now back in grad school at UT Austin, studying human dimensions of organizations, once again demonstrating that great leaders are always keen to learn more about how they can lead themselves and others more effectively. Rob, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Pleasure to be with you, Andrew. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, for the audience to get to know you a little bit, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and where your current focus is?
Okay. I'll try to keep it brief. I grew up here in Houston, did not take the traditional route, didn't go to college right out of high school. Spent 9 years with Safeway stores, was a Safeway store manager when I was 21. Spent 9 years there, as I said, experienced really amazing leadership. I thought I'd be there forever. And a year before I left, the guy that I really revered, this amazing leader, was promoted to division president. The guy who replaced him was a bad guy. And so I left and went into search for the first time in 1979, did that for 5 years, loved it. Went to work for my largest client in 1984, which was National Convenience Stores. Wound up running their largest operating division, which was 516 stores spread between El Paso and West Palm Beach. Went back to school, got undergraduate degrees and all the things you've already talked about. Went to work for cash and carry food stores, ostensibly as the heir apparent to the president in 1991. Did some really cool things. Went back into search in 1994, founded my own firm in 96. And for the first 17 years of our existence here, Andrew, all I was focused on was doing search better than anyone else. It bothered me then, and it still bothers me today, that almost 1 in every 2 executive hires globally goes bad within 18 months. And I think that's just because, we don't learn how to do this in school. No one teaches us how to interview, how to hire. So we spent the first 17 years building, a process to allow us to facilitate matches that work and last. And then about 11 years ago, we began studying organizations that perform at the very top of their sectors. Kind of a long story in terms of how that happened, but that has been a fascinating thing. And so we now recognize that there are, and I wouldn't present any of these things to you as the last word on wisdom, but there seems to us that there are 9 principles at work in organizations that perform at the very top of their sectors, not the top 10%, but at the very top. And so we've developed diagnostics to go into organizations and assess the strength of their cultures, the climate of their cultures, the degree to which their beliefs might be limited, and to begin to work with leaders through coaching and workshops toward what we call a culture of peak performance. So cultures of peak performance, we believe, are the only sustainable competitive advantage. Everything else can be copied, and so that's a huge part of our passion these days, and that's why I'm back in grad school, which a lot of people think I'm nuts, but it's a lot of fun.
Great. And you're obviously leading the firm and have been for a long time. So you've got a lot there that's going on. So where's your energy and where do you try and focus your time and your energy?
So I have the next generation of leadership here in the firm. So we've hired a number of significantly younger, probably more talented leaders who are taking over the operational leadership of the firm. And what I'm trying to do is to spend most of my time on not only developing relationships, but also doing my research, which includes a lot of reading and writing and interviewing and studying. And that's one of the reasons I'm back in grad school. Continuing to put a fine point on our study and our architecture. I've got a second book that I hope to publish sometime in 2024. The title of which we haven't figured out yet, but what I'm trying to do now is influence the way people think about leadership, influence the way people think about hiring, and all of this is really to try to make the world a better place. I know that sounds a little bit pie in the sky, but it's really not. I mean, depending on who you read, I mean, if you read Accenture, you read McKinsey, you read Gardner, I mean, any of these studies, only about 5% of the companies on the planet really do the people element, or as the University of Texas says, the human dimensions of organizations really well. And so I believe that's because we're not teaching it, by and large in our colleges and universities and business schools. So we're trying to have an influence along those lines. And that's where I'm focusing my time.
Great, thank you. And we both know, because we've been working with leaders for a long time, and what informs a lot of what a leader does and how they behave, and sometimes dysfunctionality of teams and how they work, is how those childhood experiences that we have as leaders shape our leadership style. So it'd be great for our audience just to maybe have some insight in terms of what childhood experiences you had, that have shaped the leadership style, certainly in your earlier years.
Sure. So, I grew up, as I said, here in Houston, middle class family, working dad, and he was a hard worker. I think he set an example for me. I used to go to his office with him quite regularly on Saturdays, and so I kind of got a taste of business that way. And I went to work really, really young. I had my own business, a couple of my own businesses. Had a car, wash, polish, and wax service. Had a lawn service, and then I went to work for a small convenience store chain when I was 11. Did that for a couple of years, and worked for a small supermarket chain. Went to work for Safeway stores on my 16th birthday, and that I believe those, especially the first 8 years I spent with Safeway, really, it was tremendously impactful for me. I mean, it was profound in that the gentleman that grew our division here in Houston, basically from 0 stores to 90 over 8 years, was a phenomenal leader. I mean, he just, and he wasn't out of central casting. He's not somebody that you would expect to be an up and comer. He didn't have a degree. He'd been a produce department manager for 10 years. But he was this amazing leader, and he had very high standards. He was tough as nails operationally, but no one was afraid of him. And that's an interesting balance. No one was afraid of this guy, although, you didn't want to disappoint him, but you weren't afraid of him. He took an interest in us. He treated us like adults. He gave us purpose. He told us why we were there, that we weren't there to please the suits that we were there to please Mrs. Jones and to help, to make her life better. So it was an amazing time. And of course, as I've shared with you earlier, what I couldn't realize, what I couldn't appreciate back then, I do now, is what an amazing leadership approach he had. And of course, when he left, got promoted to division president, he set records everywhere he went. He set records in 5 different divisions until he finally retired. And it was that inclusive, high performance, having a purpose greater than just making money. It was his approach that made it special. And so I've come to realize just how special that is and how rare it is.
And it's great to hear that. And it's good you had that influence so early in your career. Many don't in that sense. But I'm also interested about that ethos from your family and your father about this hard work ethic as well. And obviously a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs have that as part of their DNA. And it serves us very well most of the time. But when did you first notice during your leadership that maybe some of that ethic coming back from your childhood was impacting you negatively in some way?
Well, that's a great question. So one of the many things we do here in our firm is we do Gallup strengths assessments. And in helping people build high performance cultures, we like the idea of putting people in a position to win, assessing their strengths, giving them an opportunity to do more of what they really do well. And so your question is on point in this context, in that your strengths are always, your weaknesses are, the other side of the same coin of your strengths. So one of my number one strength is strategic. I can always see the way forward. I can see different alternatives. I'm a learner. I'm a hard worker, and not everybody's built like that. I mean, so one of the things that I've learned, I wish I'd learned this much earlier in life, but one of the things I'm learning, I should say, is that you have to build organizations to allow people to use their individual strengths. It was frustrating to me earlier in my career that everybody didn't think the way I did, and so does that answer your question? I mean, it's
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and also I'm interested in, particularly as you get more senior in leadership, and obviously you've been running your own business for a long time. I think sometimes those things from our past can affect the way we show up in relationships. So even though we've got those strengths and we overplay them sometimes. So are there any really good examples you've got where there were critical relationships with your stakeholders, whoever they were, that you just knew that sometimes you were getting in your own way?
I would have to say, yeah, there have been several. I've had several watershed moments, if you will. One of them was, this is not on my resume because I only spent a year with the Kroger company. I left Safeway, went to work for Roth Young in the search business, did that for a year, was recruited out by Kroger, did that for a year, and then went back into search. But during my time with Kroger, I ran 3 different stores. During that year, it was a great year. I learned a lot. It just turns out it wasn't a great fit for me, the company itself. And so we parted friends, and they continue to be good clients. But one of the guys, one of the assistant managers who worked with me in one of the stores that I was responsible for as a store manager, pointed out to me that I spent way too much time pointing out what was wrong and not nearly enough time pointing out what was right. And, nowadays, I mean, that was 30 some odd years ago. Now, one of my favorite books is, Ken Blanchard's The 1 Minute Manager, catch him doing something right. And so that's, I have to be careful of that. I mean, in operations, especially, retail operations, we are trained to look for what's wrong. We're trained to look for the exception. We read exception reports. We manage P&Ls that way. We manage balance sheets. and we're always looking for where the variances are and where the it's like a doctor reading a blood work report. You're looking for what's wrong. And so I have to continually be reminded that you get much more value out of recognizing the similarities and of doing what we now call appreciative inquiry. What do we really do well, and how can we do more of it? And if we can spend most of our time, if I can spend most of my time doing that and not paying as much attention to what's wrong, then that's a good thing. I was talking with some colleagues a couple of weeks ago, and we were laughing about, when we have an engagement that doesn't go exactly the way we want it to, we always do a postmortem, and we try to go back and figure out what we could have done better. What we don't do often enough is when we have one that's just spectacular. I mean, we're finishing one right now. It's a CFO search for a couple of $100 million industrial company, and it's just been flawless. Now, I mean, we do good work, so they're all pretty good, but this one has just been spectacular. And we have not been tempted to say, hey, this has really been phenomenal. Why don't we really dig into this one and do a postmortem and figure out everything that went right and why it went right? That's just that's not our natural tendency, or it's not my natural tendency.
Well, that leads me into another question. Thank you for that, where I can relate to the fact that when I learned what things didn't work for me in relationship, as you've described, I tried to adapt my style. And for me, it was actually focusing less on trying to achieve things all the time when people weren't behind me and achieving the same things, and to create more space in my life, really, so that I knew what to do, when to do it. What about yourself in terms of that inner work for you, as well as letting others play to their strengths? What's been the most significant thing for you on the inner work in terms of reconciling, your leadership style over time?
Well, so I think one of the things that's really been eye-opening for me, we do a lot of work not only in building high-performance cultures on a macro level, but also doing the more micro level kinds of things that you have to do to get there. For an example, there are a lot of companies out there now trying to do DE&I initiatives and stakeholder engagement and purpose driven. A lot of companies are now saying we need to be purpose driven. It's been eye opening for me and useful for me to recognize that if we are united by purpose, if we're united by a common set of values, then we can allow for all the diversity we want. We can allow for differences of opinion, different political views, different generations. I mean, one of the big challenges we face today is we have 7 different generations in the workplace, and so everything from baby boomers to Gen Zers, Gen Is. I mean, I forget all the different, but I mean, we've got a whole bunch of different generations, and we think differently. Baby boomers think differently than Gen Xers and Gen Zers, or Zoomers, I think they call them. So it's interesting. So and hopefully this is on point. But in graduate school right now, as a matter of fact, Saturday, I'll be presenting in class. And this particular class is called Society, Culture, and Diversity. So, this whole program is built around, driving organizational performance through the human dimensions of organizations. And there are only 9 students in this cohort. So I picked a partner to present with me, and I picked the person in my class in the cohort who's the most different from me. Okay, so this is the realization that you teach best that which you need to know, And one of the things that's most difficult for me, and I think a lot of us, is working with people who disagree with us, right? Working with people who don't share all of our, thought patterns. So I picked a young lady, and she's 35. She's African American. I'm an old, Caucasian guy. She's a very young, she's in her mid 30s. We have very different views on everything. I mean, literally everything. She doesn't believe that organizational culture exists. She has a whole different set of beliefs, but we're on a project together. And so we've come together with a, we're united by a purpose to share with our classmates, and to begin a conversation about how we work together, in harmony with people of different generations, of different belief systems, different ideological beliefs. And so, it's been a learning experience and a growing experience, and one that I think will help me with one of my weaker points.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. What I've noticed as well in terms of the kinds of people that we work with is, and it links to what you were saying a little bit, is that I think sometimes the more negative feelings we have as leaders, it tends to affect us in our relationships and our leadership strategies. So what kind of strategies have you had over the years to maintain that positivity, that discernment rather than judgment in terms of the way you lead?
I think there's several things. I think on a macro level, it's my opinion that leaders are readers, and if you're not constantly feeding your mind good stuff, then if you're not growing, you're shrinking. And so, I'm always listening to, really good audio books and reading and so forth. One of the techniques that I've learned, um, probably not a technique now that I think about it, but it's kind of a philosophy, and that is assuming that everyone's intentions are pure. Assuming that they're doing the best that they can do, assuming that they want to do a good job, that they're trying to do the best they can, and not the otherwise. Because if you take the, like, I've adopted a philosophy that says you and I meet, we don't know one another. With me, you start at 100%, and you can subtract from that. If you show me over time that you don't follow through on your commitments and you don't show up on time and things of that nature, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, then your stock goes down with me. There are other, I think earlier in my career, you started at zero and you had to build up from there. And so, I try to get everybody the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I've read a lot of Richard Branson's material, and he's got that. He's a forgiving, kind, understanding leader. I think that goes a long way, especially in today's workplace. Um, I don't want any poison in my heart. I don't hold grudges. I forgive easily, quickly, and completely. And so, I think that's an easier, softer way to live than assuming that people are,
I agree.
you know,
Yeah, I agree. And thinking about obviously the years of experience that you have and still the energy you have and the appetite and curiosity for learning, what comes to mind in terms of our audience and the advice that you would give to leaders out there who can relate to your story today? They can really take, maybe they've started work young, they've worked really hard for what they do, maybe set up their own businesses, but how can they channel those early experiences into sustainable leadership as long as you have?
oh, well, hopefully longer, and hopefully without as many mistakes. If so, people ask me, because of the research work I do and the writing and all that sort of thing. They said, "What would you do differently?" So you've been in business now 27 years. If you could go back and do it all over, what would you do differently? And the answer is so crystal clear. I hope this will resonate, and make a big difference for everyone who's listening to or watching this podcast, I would start with purpose, mission, vision, values. I would have started with that 27 years ago, and I would have hired to that. I would fire to that. I would promote based on that. And that would be my North Star. Purpose is our North Star, or can be. And the corresponding set of, this corresponding mission, vision, and values that flow from purpose, and the strategy that flows from those, that's the glue. That's what keeps us together. And that's what, those things are, the things around which you can build great momentum, great cultures, and great businesses. And to the extent that you're true to those, I mean, you can look at, I could rattle off dozens of examples of companies who have been built that way, and have had tremendous success, unprecedented success in many cases. And where there are companies that are built just to make money, they're subject to, they're subject to the whims of the market. And you watch companies that are built with purpose; they're not that way. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think one of the challenges I find with a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders I work with is that there are so many things out there that try and put you off balance in terms of your purpose, what it is that you're here to do. And as you say, staying to that true north, despite everything, usually means you'll end up in the right place.
And look, so we talk about our leadership architecture. There are 9 principles, and being driven by a purpose greater than just making money is one of them. A high performance mindset is another. Measuring everything that matters, disciplined human capital practices, measuring what matters, all those. So there's this elegant simplicity in the philosophy of being driven by a purpose greater than just making money, and in these principles that we talk about. But just because it has an elegant simplicity to it does not mean it's easy. It's just not. So, we are, I heard it saying not very long ago, we're subject to the tyranny of the urgent. And that's what happens. So you can have the very best of intentions, but you have to be constantly reminded. I'm a little bit disturbed at this point by, I see Southwest Airlines appearing to be a little off the beam, I suspect that might have something to do with, the company's only had 3 CEOs, and its new CEO seems to be struggling a little bit. With Herb Kelleher and Gary Kelly, they constantly reinforced purpose. I mean, every time Southwest Airlines magazine came out, every month, I think that's another huge mistake they made, by the way, is they quit printing that magazine that 6 million people read, which, continually reinforced, the Southwest Airlines ethos, the soul of the company, their purpose, and so forth. But staying on track is hard, and it takes constant diligence. And unfortunately, great cultures, great company cultures, are very perishable. I mean, they can take, what's taken years and years and years to build can vanish just like that.
I agree. Now let's look to the future, Rob, and what is it that's the dream left for you in terms of both personally and professionally? You've still got a lot of energy. What is it that you really want to create out of there or contribute to, and how can people collaborate with you?
It's a great question. So, as I've alluded earlier, I want to leave the world a better place. I want to have influence and change the way people think about leadership, the way people think about the human dimensions of organizations. And so the way, really for the last 10 years, most of the business that I've done has been with people who are of like mind. And so we're working with professors at the University of Texas, both in the liberal arts, the College of Liberal Arts, and the McCombs School of Business, to try to collaborate to make things better to reach more people, to have more influence. Obviously, I got to pay the light bills along the way. So, we have to generate revenue as well. But the bigger goal is to change the way people think about leadership. And so we're doing a lot of different things with a lot of different people. We're now starting to work with private equity firms. We're working with investment bankers, venture capitalists who are interested in culture, who are interested in the human. I hate to sound like a broken record, but sound like a UT commercial, but that are interested in the human dimensions of organizations, so that we can begin to teach and influence, and in doing so have happier workforces, more profitable companies, more successful. I mean, the world's just going to be better. So it's an uphill battle, but it's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely. And obviously you're on the website, and if people want to get hold of Rob and really, have a chat about this and how they can help and collaborate with Rob, then I'm sure that you'll be happy to have
Absolutely.
a chat with them. I really appreciate you sharing your story with our audience today. I know that many of them will have been inspired to reflect on their own leadership style, how they might take a different approach to leading themselves and others in the future. So thank you very much for your time, Rob. I really appreciate you joining us. I hope that everyone out there enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can find out more information about conscious leadership and self-coaching by typing in Andrew Tallants into LinkedIn or Google. And until next time we meet, don't forget, stay present, stay curious, and above all, stay conscious. Bye, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallants into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.